Good.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sean Carey, and I'm with
Dr. Bill Moss.
And today we're so exciting because we're interviewing our good friend Casey Lepper, who is joining us from Austin, Texas. And Casey is a family therapist, family marriage therapist. She has her master's in psychotherapy. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And then she's also a spiritual guide, which is how we met. And Casey is somebody who just has a ton of wisdom. She is working with families and couples all the time through both energy healing as well as her work as a psychotherapist. So we thought it'd be really fun to be able to kind of go back and forth through some different topics. And then Casey, maybe you could give us a little bit of a background as far as just how you got into psychotherapy.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for the introduction and for inviting me on your podcast. I started just really, really interested in the human mind and how people, why people did the things that they did. So I entered into college going straight into psychology, and I didn't know which direction that I would go. I was gearing up to do more of a PhD research route and got diverted, luckily, to more applied, where I got to work with people and really learn why, where trauma comes up, how to heal, how to overcome obstacles, and really how to lay the foundation for, someone living their best life. And through my training in psychotherapy and the experience of working with clients, I found who I really, really enjoyed working with. And it was people who were not interested in just achieving the status quo, overcoming obstacles to just live an okay life, but really to live an extraordinary life. Mm-hmm. And I saw that I could have an impact on people on an individual level, but also within relational dynamics. So whether that's with intimate relationships or, friends or family members, and really how when a relationship is harmonious, it can really push us forward and give us the inspiration and the foundation to be able to continue to grow. And in my own journey with it, I was about 5 years in my private practice working with couples. And I just found like I needed some more tools to work with them. I could work with the mind and work with some of the knowledge that I had to shift how we think and shift how we feel and shift how we behave. But there seemed to be a block in how accelerated the process was. And just some people couldn't get out of these loops of how they were thinking. And I found that I was working with a therapist who is also very, very intuitive. And she saw things in me I didn't even yet see in myself. And it was through seeing her and working with her that she was offering a reflection point, and then also gave me some tools and some healings that really just shifted me completely. Like really, it was beyond what I could really explain. And, that's when I started bringing more of the spiritual aspect into it, because I saw a limit within my own life. And I am a big believer we can't take anyone further than we've gone ourselves.
Yes.
And, but, my love for psychotherapy is in the applied seeking and understanding of the mind and of certain patterns that either keep us really or help us be empowered or keep us really limited. And then, how to make our practical day-to-day life really special. And for me, I recognize that's a certain point that we need the soul and the spirit involved in that work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. At what point, at what point do you do that with a client now? Like, how do you introduce it? I'm so super curious. We're both chiropractors, energy healers, spiritual guides. So there's this kind of organic way of interweaving the additional practice that we have for ourselves and that progression. How do you have that worked into your practice, or when you work with a client or couples in a relationship aspect? How do you do that? I'm curious.
I think it's shifted throughout time. Now, when people come into me, if they're referred and who they're referred by gives me a lot of insight that, okay, they're looking for more of what, the hybrid, the interweaving of both. And then also sometimes people who just find me really organically, they're just dropping certain things. They say phrases that indicate to me that they're searching for something more. And I think when you, and I'm sure you both feel this, when you're sitting with someone, you get a sense of there's something in their awareness that they can't really put their finger on. And that's when I'll bring it in. And there's certainly people who, I really appreciate all approaches with healing and with personal development. I don't think that there's one right way to do it. So there's people who are so connected to spirit who, I've never felt like it's the time to bring it up for one reason or another. And so there's certainly people that I work with, and I think I can't see you being open to this. I can't see you really, really wanting this. But I would say the vast majority of people, once I started combining it, you have that direct experience of how much faster it helps someone move through things. And so the risk and the courage to be able to bring it up is, it's a lot easier once you have that experience. And when, I can say for myself, I have studied psychology formally for 4 years, and then went to psychotherapy for 3. So I understood the mind and I understood the tools, but I still was stuck. I had aspects of myself that didn't feel free. And I luckily had mentors who said we need to bring the soul into the work, and looked at archetypes and Jungian psychology that was much more esoteric and spiritual to me. And so I think you get a sense of who might be ready for it. And some people surprises me once we finally do it, how much it moves them and how ready they were.
I absolutely love that. I feel similarly too, as far as working as a chiropractor, because sometimes not all of my patients do the energy work. It's a percentage. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Maybe 40 or 50% end up kind of doing it. But there's some people it's just I just know it's not their thing, and they know it's not their thing, but we might have the flyers on the desk or that type of thing. And it's great they can come in for chiropractic care, and I'm happy to serve them. But then you do have those people who are they're looking for something a bit more as well, or they're at least open to it. And it's really amazing to be able to, as a chiropractor, to see their patterns change once we start shifting their energy. Because oftentimes these chronic stress patterns in their body that have just been there over and over and over again start getting lifted, because they're letting go of that stress or that emotional pain, and it's shifting their physical structure. And then we get to see their cases really take off. And it's fun to see it, just because it's like it feels like you're just operating totally outside the box, and you can get some really amazing results.
Well, the person I was mentioning, the therapist, she was my massage therapist, and then she was very, very gifted, and she could feel the patterns in my body. And then she would talk to me during the massage, and then it just developed into her taking on a different role where I'd come to her and to just talk. And so she felt and saw what was going on in my body, and could deduce so much from, how I was thinking and where I was locked up and what emotions I wasn't able to express. So that mind body connection and the energy that is part of that is, I think, powerful and so real.
Yeah. It's like the entry point for greater healing can come through the mind. It can come through the physical body. And kind of like the one thing I love that you said is, when we start working with a person, you don't know what they're actually looking for, even until you make progress to, open a new door or window to be like, invite this in. I'm always surprised with some of the people that end up really wanting to work on their soul and their spirit and go much deeper than it was. The physical was just like this entry point into our practice that opened this door for so much greater healing. And I'm sure you see that in the mind. And it sounds like, I always view it as like, that's kind of the artistry in being a healer that has multiple modalities to read that individual and work with them to kind of unlock the greater potential, because it gives you so much more. We've all seen that and how that works together. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And one thing we had talked about too prior to joining this was some of the work that you're doing as far as masculine and feminine, and helping to heal relationships and helping to heal that. And I would love if we could go into that a bit, because you're somebody who I think you embody that really well. And then you also have such a beautiful family too. So it's like you obviously have a lot of wisdom in that department that I think would be great to share with others.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think that on one level, when I was training and studying under different, methods and philosophies with couples therapy and relational therapy, and realizing that no matter what, if we're in a dynamic with someone, we create some sort of system. And that system works, and it just becomes something greater than the sum of its parts. And if the parts of the system are working in tandem and there's a correct balance, then that system is going to lead to more harmony. But if there's issues in those parts, then of course it's either going to break down or lead to disharmony. And so that was always there. I always saw this, I was always drawn to an idea of this integration and this balance. And I saw it with the left and right hemispheres of the brain, or, the mind to the body. And, then as I dove deeper and received a lot of the teachings with masculine and feminine, I realized that one big error that we have really in our culture is how women are kind of believing that they need to be one way in a relationship, and how it's leading to men thinking they need to be another way in a relationship, and how it's pressing on the whole system. And so how I see this in so many of the couples that I work with is they are equal partnership financially, but she inevitably ends up taking much more of the responsibility with the social calendar, if they have kids, just so much responsibility. And that there's, the majority of the women I see are kind of perfectionist, always wanting to push themselves, never rest, never stop. And so then they become resentful and bitter towards their partner, their male partner, and he can't really do anything right. Either he doesn't do it fast enough, he doesn't do right enough, and then he's kind of like, well, I'm a little, I don't have a place. And so I just have seen, from the top down, this huge, this pattern that is really prevalent in so many of the relationships that I work with. And so when I started diving more into it, and it was present in my own too. So, I was very, I never felt weak for being a woman. That was never an agenda or an idea that I thought, that I never really believed in. But did I think I had to be doing something all the time to prove myself? I did. And so seeing that in so many women, and when I started studying masculine and feminine, some people say it's kind of this new trend, not realizing it's part of really ancient traditions and really, really deep wisdom teachings about, polarity and gender and some of these energies that are innate within all of us. And if we're out of balance inside ourselves, then the relationship as a result is going to be out of balance. And that's where you see more conflict. That's where you see role confusion. That's where you see a lot of resentment and kind of a loss of connection as a result. And so I started working with it by just trying to change the roles that couples were holding in their relationships, for them to really identify, what are your roles? What are your strengths? And realizing, why do you feel like you have to take the majority of the role? Why aren't you trusting, where is this coming from? And so what it's led to is a lot of the couples I work with, the couples work is the strategic shifting of the pattern and the system of the relationship. And then the individual work is being able to create more balance within. And for women, it's a lot about self-love and self-worth and self-esteem. Not leaning to perfectionism, not leaning to people pleasing, and really feeling like, oh, I love myself. And from that love, then I can do, that's where I have to start. So prioritizing the self in a different way. And for men, I think it's about, I'm seeing a trend in them wanting to feel like they're leading something, that they're trusted, that they, that their partner knows that they have their back, and there doesn't need to be so much stress. And then also to feel more cared for without being mothered. So that's kind of a hard balance that I think is an issue right now. So it's these different, like, the spiritual level is that masculine, feminine, and the kind of more physical, psychological level is how it comes up and how much we fight, or how we talk to each other, or, what our true relationship looks like.
There's so much to what you just shared. That's really awesome. One of the first thoughts I was having was when we were talking before about the archetypes and Jungian psychology and those different archetypes. And a lot of that is actually there's many different archetypes. Some of that are like the old gods and goddesses, and then there are maybe the archetypes of the tarot, and then there are other archetypes as well. But oftentimes those archetypes too are great places to have a better understanding of masculine and feminine. And it's something that we as a world and culture now, we're really disconnected from the archetypes. And I think on a really deep level, it's led to a lot of confusion to people about their identity and how they fit. They just don't have those same models to look to about how to be that great man, or how to be that great woman, or how to fulfill the role in a good way.
Yeah, and the one piece that I think you painted that, I can relate to so much that you were saying, because number one, I've been married for over 18 years now to a therapist. So now I've been married to a therapist, and also I've been in couples counseling before, and we did emotionally focused therapy years ago. And I love the idea of, and I feel like this is what you're painting the picture, is like this infinity loop of like so many people will get caught in the beginning of the end of the thing that's occurring. And you can't really put a start and a finish on this. It's like you have to actually identify the pattern of how the interaction is happening to really do anything about it. In those roles that you were describing, I was sitting here almost like, oh my gosh, what do you do if you can't get out of that? And it's like, the problem is most people can't get out of that. And then it leads to this misunderstanding because everyone just has that opinion. So, what are some of your strategies with people? Like, how do you take them on that journey to kind of repair that? I'm just curious, like, and when you start to see that for the couple.
Well, I always start with creating a vision for what they want. And I have the couple do it separately to see what is there an alignment with what they both want. And so there's buy-in there. So they know where they're wanting to head. And almost everyone, they'll start with, I want to improve communication. Like that's the thing people say.
Wow.
But when you have a homework assignment to really spend time, like, this is your vision for the whole relationship, and you're going to read it in front of someone else. It makes you actually put pen to paper and really think about it. And I think most often people talk about this sense of being able to trust each other, to be able to flow, to be able to have like a partnership, and the idea of a team. And so with some people, the language can be like a union, like a union where you both are trying to eliminate aspects of your subconscious and your ego, and to be able to be your higher self. Some people have that language that we can then jump into. And some people just say they want peace in the relationship. And so once we target the vision, then I break them up into individual sessions where I get to know them. So I'm getting to hear what their story is, and their childhood and their upbringing, and I'm able to kind of extract some of the beliefs that are probably getting in the way of the deeper stuff. Some couples really can't. There's such poor communication habits and conflict management skills that we have to start there to get anywhere bigger. But if people can end up, like, if they can talk and they can, pull back from really, really harsh arguments and, like really, really volatile, if they can communicate and talk, then we can get straight into that, I would say, like restructuring and repatterning. But in that, I try to create their own self-responsibility, like that, their realization is that the issues that come up in the relationship are both of their problems. It's not one or the other. And it's being able to see the stance of, how did I impact them? Like, what did I say that then resulted in them saying something that ended up creating a fight? So it's being able to see that infinity loop, like that all the patterns, all of our interactions are very connected. And it's not to blame one or the other, but it's really to take a shared responsibility for the problem. And I think that creates, a humility in the process, which is why couples can be particularly challenging for people. That it's, people sit with their own stories in their head about why things are happening the way they are. And the second they get that reflection, they can, it's not favorable. It can be uncomfortable. But that's why I think couples work is so profoundly important, because you're able to really clear some of your own stuff really, really fast if you're doing it in a very aware, productive setting.
I love how you start with the vision for the relationship and creating that, that aspect of we're a team and this is what we want together. Because ultimately, I think one of the biggest disconnections we have in the world right now is that it's kind of masculine over here and feminine over here, and it's just way too separate. And the greatest potential is really the two coming together, both within and in the relationship.
Yeah, and when you do that vision, you can see that some just might not be compatible.
Yeah.
If you were really giving yourself time to think about how you want to live your life, and you hear your partners and it's very, very different, sometimes no amount of couples therapy can help you feel a compatible direction or path. So it can either stop the process really early or become somewhat of the mission statement for the work.
I love that. And that's also sometimes what people need too, as if it's, something that's just causing suffering, then sometimes you just need to let it go and move on to what's the right fit for you.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny that you're bringing up this process, and I'm like reflecting back to when I did couples counseling, and my wife and I did it actually right after we both got initiated. I went to Empower Thyself thinking this was going to be the thing to help me move on from the relationship. And it actually pointed me back to the relationship. And we both found like we just never really dealt with it. We had very good coping mechanisms and masks and processes and programs and ways to make everything look kind of pretty. And it was as soon as like we started to address the internal self, we really started to make progress. And I remember being in those sessions and witnessing like, if I would have only known that, I would have been different. You know what I mean? Like if I would have only known this about you and this is how you felt and what your vision was and what you were looking for and how I would have made so many different decisions. And it was very eye-opening to see like that realization that people can have. Now, when you're working with individuals and people, we probably have this experience as healers. A lot of times we see our own work that can need to be done. How has that continued to help you develop in working with people, seeing what they're going through, and then also working it within your own life? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, it happens a lot. It's really nice to have, a good variety of clients who are always able to point out my own stuff. I think working with clients, I definitely get to see my tendency towards perfectionism. And I think that when I'm out of balance, I'll always lean to the masculine. I'll always. And I see it in so many people I work with. So then as I'm talking to them, I'm realizing I have to keep this in check. It's a constant balancing act for me because, I think if you lean more masculine as a woman, and you lean more perfectionist, then you lean more to the doing and the action, and you lead to more like, wanting to be independent because of some fear. And what that fear could be is very different for other people. So as I'm talking to people, and it changes, it's very seasonal and cyclical. Right now, there's a particular topic that just seems to be coming up with so many people, which is this balance between being committed in a long-term relationship and being free, like kind of this freedom of expression, but then, stability within a relationship. So it's like, as the seasons come and as the clients come, and some people, I'm their reflection. Like I'm kind of their coach or their mentor in certain ways. So through their life stages, I can see, what patterns have really been let go of and which ones kind of come back and which ones are always very easy to pick back up on. So I am grateful to be able to be client facing because I do get to see so much. I get to learn so much about myself. And I think it's had an extraordinary impact on my, relationship too. We've been married for 10 years and, certainly through my changes in this work, we've, we're not in the same relationship we were when we started. Where I was like a baby. And it's changed a couple of times. And actually, one of my favorite quotes by Esther Perel, who's a really famous couples or relational therapist, she talks about that most of us have, 2 to 3 really significant romantic relationships in our life. And some of us are lucky to have that with the same person, that it's like you really, as you're changing and you're doing your work and you're growing, the relationship has to change.
Yeah.
And that we can't look at a relationship and say, oh, they've been together for 50 years. That's incredible. That maybe that's perseverance and discipline and commitment. But what's really happened to the soul of the person? Have they been able to grow? Has the relationship changed to be able to hold the two people is a really important aspect of what makes a satisfying relationship.
Amazing. Casey, when you're feeling out of balance within yourself, like say you feel like you're starting to lean towards perfectionism again, or you're starting to kind of lean into the masculine energy, would you be willing to share anything that helps you like come back into your feminine? And also for like men too, if you have men who are clients and they're getting out of balance, suggestions you might make to help them come back.
The first recommendation I give is to do something creative that's not about that's more about the process and the outcome. So some of my clients, like one of my long-term clients who she's a doctor and runs really, really anxious, and she got into pottery. And she said it was the first time, I think medical school trains you to be very it changes the brain. It just changes how you look at things. And so her whole life is built on that structure that, it's all about the achievement. It's all about pushing yourself even past where you think you're comfortably able to have well-being. And so when she started pottery, she had tried different creative outlets, but pottery was the one where she felt like, oh, I can actually be in this and be present. And I don't care if it looks like crap. It was the first time. And I think that with men or women, that creative process. So it could be, I think working with your hands, there's something about the physicality. The mentalism is what can, I think, incite or ignite more of the perfectionism and just the anxiety and the productivity. So something that's movement-based, tactical, planting plants, painting, doing something that is just bringing you into your body.
So good.
That's great.
Yeah, my daughter goes to Waldorf school, and I feel like you just described the early elementary program of Waldorf school. I mean, it's so true. I remember the first time doing the Kabbalah journey, even just in creative expression. And you have children. I have a young child. It's I'm so lucky of how much I get to dive into that aspect of just play for the sake of playing, not having a goal with it, just see where it goes, getting dirty, playing and outside in the physical and everything. And it's what you're describing, I'm having this realization oh my God, that's one of the best things that ever happened to me for so many reasons. But this is also an additional one that's been helpful because, I see that within my wife, that perfection driven archetype that can get out of balance. And it's like, I've seen how our daughter has really helped us do that. And not that children fix relationships, but do you see that in your own self and in some of your clients, like how that act and having a young one can actually really, really support what you're describing there?
Oh, definitely. Just the process of coloring, and it's like how long has it been since I've used my hands? Like,
I know.
yeah, where like once a young child comes, I think it really pushes you into that. And I have a son who will be 4 in February and a daughter who will be 2 in December. And particularly when I was pregnant with my daughter, I think there's something about carrying a female where
Mm,
it is when I had to learn the biggest lesson of when to say no. Like
mm,
when I don't need a push. I was pushing in
mm,
business and pushing in, even spiritual expansion. And I really had to, say, like, my body was exhausted. I was
mm,
burnt out. And it's when I really, really had to come back into focus and say, I have to accept being right now. And it happened to be in the fall and winter, which is,
Yeah.
more the feminine times that allows us to be, I prioritize creativity. Um, for me, decorating for holidays is part of that. Connection. So hosting dinners, like,
Yeah.
and that it's not about rushing around and making sure everything's perfect and being anxious all day before people come over for dinner. It's about inviting people into your space to give them something. So it's the
mm.
same action in a way, but very different energies.
Right.
And I think that, yes, like to your point, Bill, on many different levels, the kids inspire a lot of change. And when I had children, it made me say I really want to be the best version of myself.
Yeah.
And that version continues to change as what, they're just teaching me. They're such clear teachers.
So good. Yeah.
And I didn't want to hand down to my daughter, the lineage that I was, which is, it's an honor to be burnt out and
Right.
stressed,
Right.
100%. I feel I like that hits really hard. I mean, I have that inner reflection all the time, but also seeing that like you do the stakes become a little bit higher
Yeah.
if you're really looking to go a lot deeper when you have children, because we've talked about it on this podcast, but like they just learn so much beyond like spoken word to them, right? They're just
Mhm.
learning and reflecting it back in such rapid success that it gives you a lot more clarity if you're willing to look along that journey, and a lot more joy for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you're a mother with young children, and you're just kind of super depleted, you're holding the child so much in your energy, and then that container
Yeah.
ends up being empty for the child. So, yeah, I think it's ultra important for mothers to be able to connect to that balance.
Yeah, and that's where my like my path of the work and what I really want to prioritize in terms of what I study and who I
Yeah.
see. I think your relationships took on a huge shape, but once I became a parent and realizing once you do become a parent that it brings up so much of the issues to the surface,
Mm,
and it really magnifies some of the aspects of self that are connected to like previous programming and where you can see it. So being like helping people be really conscious, and I think most people I work with, a lot of it does boil down to the things that they were taught early on. And
mm,
if you're not coming into being a parent really balanced and really healed, then you are going to pass that on.
Yeah.
And so I think just the responsibility of
mm.
being able to clean up your projections.
It's such a beautiful, it's such a beautiful, important conversation, and it's one of the things that made me fall in love with this work too, the spiritual work,
Hmm.
because one of the things we really talk about, especially with things like Kabbalah or life activation initiation, is how it actually affects your DNA.
Mm,
And spiritually, our DNA has a lot of imprints with it, imprints from our childhood and our ancestry, those things have been passed along. And oftentimes you look at families and you're like, oh, yeah, I was this way and my dad was this way and his father was this way. And you keep going back. And some of those things are really great. I can look at both my parents and see like really great traits that I get from them, and also different things that were like, oh, that was a really negative pattern that I got over here. And I haven't found any other thing that's really helped me to clear those patterns the way that this energetic work has, because it's not always just it's not always a psychological thing. I feel like it is this energetic imprint that we have within our DNA that can be a tendency for us to be this way. And eventually like that process, that DNA has to get cleaned out. Otherwise the pattern's just going to keep repeating. And that repetition just ends up in repetitive suffering for the family line. That was a huge piece for me with this work, was going around and really like actively working on healing my family.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the best things I've ever done in life by far.
Yeah. Yeah, there's research that the things that people believe about themselves, even if they were adopted, and how that ends up connecting to their actual family of origin.
Wow.
That they've done this work is, particularly with Holocaust survivors, and deep studies about how even certain phrases and words are picked up, even though they had no direct connection to those people. And so certainly, and I feel the same. When I entered into the mystery school, I had a very contentious relationship with my mom, and very
It's a prerequisite.
And I know. And then right after Empower Thyself, I was able to be around her and not take on her energy. And she saw that I had changed. And that's how my husband knew I had changed. He's like, whoa, and it wasn't something like before, from a psychological perspective, the tool would be, okay, meditate before, pray before, like that's all fine. Think of what are your thoughts before, how are you maybe prophesizing what's going to happen. All of that was great, but there was no effort. There was no effort to be at peace around her after Empower Thyself. It just was, because the energy changed, and she saw how much I shifted. So she got initiated. She's in Kabbalah right now. And she will say like it changed the line. She is Christian. She believes in the Bible, but is open to expanding like her, awareness of what could be. And she's like, that's in scripture too, that it passes through the DNA. And some of these imprints the distortions that they create. And I think that's, a lot of people ask me how many clients I see and how I keep optimistic and how I don't get drained. It's a lot easier when you have tools that are really getting to the root, and it doesn't take quite as much encouragement, not quite as much time and discipline. Like it just works. It just shifts the energy, like you were saying earlier, Sean.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like, one of our motives to start this podcast was actually the fact where people who are seeking healing, but also like anybody that works in a healing space with people, it's like, I know what you're describing, Sean described. I remember coming back from Empower Thyself, using the rituals, and I'm not worrying about people's cases. I'm not sitting at home like thinking about what they think of me. And if I felt completely separated from the energetic impressions that they were providing me each day. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm just not taking, because I remember that conversation, at least in our profession, being a huge deal. Like, how do you not take on people's stuff? Right. That's like, how do you not do that? And then always the mental response I have these strategies. And like you said, it might be meditate, priming, kind of setting yourself up for success. But yet I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, there is a line and there's a separation and there's a clarity that wasn't there. So, it's the more I do this work, and I'm sure you're kind of highlighting it, it's just wild how we just don't take on people's stuff. And you sit with a person for a very long period of time, bring up a lot of emotional energy. So I'm sure you see the fruits of what exists with the work through the mystery school readily every day. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's so, and I think empowering, right? That you can, people who are really empathetic and who really want to help. One thing I hear is like, then you just get burnt out. And I've always wanted to help people. And when you're sitting in their energy and you're hearing these, tragic things or even just stressful things, and to be able to to empathize with it and to understand it and to hold the space, but not drop down, to not get in it, which, you can't get into the muck, but you can certainly be compassionate for someone who's in it. And it's from that place, then you can actually pull someone up. That was always a really beautiful idea to me. But once I had all the tools and the rituals and, all the things that really helped actually make that viable and made that easy.
Yeah. I noticed a huge difference just as far as like as far as my health, because before doing the mystery school training, I didn't realize how much I was like using my own energy, my own chi, my own life force to just lift people up when they were suffering. And then once I started getting these tools, I was like, oh, I don't have to force it. Like it was like my being doesn't have to. I have this energy that's supporting me, that's supporting them. They can come into the space of healing, and I also don't get drained at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was really magical.
Yeah.
So with the state of the world and stress, you had mentioned the one theme that you see like coming up. What are some other things right now in your practice, in your life that you feel are, Sean and I have these conversations as far as like help people's health and what's showing up in the fall. But mental health has been, very much in the forefront in the last 4 years, rightfully so, because, I've seen people's just stress levels and mental states being so bombarded since kind of COVID and all the stress that brought that. But right now, going into kind of the next bunch of years, what do you see as like that's trending in the mental health world? And
I know that there is a geographical effect. Yeah, that I talk to clinicians, and I work with people who are in different parts of the country, and it is interesting, just certain sentiments or attitudes or focus. And but one thing I see in Austin in particularly is people are very open-minded, and there's a youthful quality and an open, people are very interested in the holistic wellness.
cool.
And I see that from people in California and Arizona and Florida. So I think that my assumption is that this is going to be a huge part of the movement forward. That years ago, 20 years ago, mind body was considered woo-woo for sure.
Yeah.
And, now in the last 10 years, in the last 7 years, the last 5 years, we have the tools and the instruments to show how much the mind body connection is real.
Awesome.
And there's so much beautiful literature and resources to convey how real it is. I think that we're now entering into the stage of being able to see how real the mind, body, soul, spirit connection is.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the vernacular. The universe has my back. Manifesting is a word that people just drop. Like, at least everyone I see, I know certain people are attracted to different healers and clinicians and therapists, but people are really ready to take responsibility. People believe in more. And I think that is just going to inspire the work so much more. It was very boxed in at a point and this is ethical, this isn't, and now it's kind of opened up a lot. And so when I'm always surprised when people come in, and especially the younger people, so, mid-20s, I think they just get it. They really do. And it's so surprising, but I feel like they understand manifestation. They understand trusting their intuition. A lot of these things have been kind of corrected, and maybe it's not integrated in like a sense of how they know to use it practically, but it's definitely there. The awareness of this is there. And so I can look to music and look to who's popular right now. And you can see like there is like a new reverence for people who are really being true to themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's indicates the way that things are going, being authentic and true to oneself. And again, how someone comes to that place can, maybe it's an illusion of who they think they are. Maybe it really is who they are. But the fact that that's the desire, I think, is a profound shift.
I love that. And it's so needed in society too. There's so much suffering trapped into this, like the way people have been living in boxes for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
And not knowing themselves or not being in balance with the masculine and feminine. Even we had talked too before about how important that balance is within ourselves as well. Like if you want to be the optimal version of yourself, a part of that is that balancing of the masculine and feminine. I know, like if I'm out of balance, it's which is also like it's something that can vary each moment in time. We can be a little bit out of balance here. And if it's something that we're not aware of, then we're not going to catch it. And then the problem ends up getting too extreme. It can cause issues with relationships or health or all these different things. So to bring this conversation to the forefront, I think is super important for people.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
And I think the last part that you said about how we're starting to recognize musicians and art, whoever's being truest to themselves. On the other end, it's like that's happening because we are more sensitive, right? So we have this greater awareness as a collective of what authenticity is and what it really isn't. Over time, like we start to, we walk in now. People come into our office, and I use the example with like intuition is. Years ago, you didn't know how somebody was feeling as readily. And like now people walk in and we understand so much more about them. And I'm like, that's so peculiar. Where did that all come from? Obviously the energies of the world shifted. My parents weren't doing that. They weren't having conversations around like, I went in, the energy was weird. And I just, they just maybe didn't go back, but they didn't talk about it. They didn't express it or show it. So it's funny to hear that you're like, this is how, so it's probably helped you as a therapist to just like have less visits with people to understand them at this point, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I do a fair amount of, staying current. And so either listening to the podcast or different books or whatever. And how many people of all generations say vibe? Like, it's like that. It could be a 70-year-old who has been practicing for 40 years. It's just like, I think that shows kind of like
so funny.
A greater sensitivity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love it. And I think it's really promising for how the world is going to unfold for, the next 50 years to actually have this awareness on the forefront.
I agree. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know. I look at the future and I'm really optimistic about it. I see such a change in the kids and really, from the education system. I think I look at different schools. I know you talked about Waldorf education, like we're looking at schools for our kids. And, the school I think we're landing on is one that teaches the hero's journey from age 4, that you're on a hero's journey. And I walked into the classroom, and this is for, ages 4 to 6 in this classroom. And it's talking about ego, and it's talking about like all these things. It felt like this is the representation of like they've learned what we need as humans, and how you can approach children and their purity, and just can take like they're so close to the source, and so they if you just honor where they are and you teach them some of these necessary structures that are actually really empowering. And the idea that from a child's parents and their instructors and their teachers, and actually the teachers are called guides in this school. If everyone has a special task, like a life's task, a mission, something special to give the world, like that desire to learn and to find out, discover oneself and one's potential is embedded early on. I just very optimistic about what change that can create in, the world at large.
It sounds like it's like really bringing the soul into the education, which has been something that's so missed. We like bringing the soul in like that at an early age, and appreciating the mission of yourself and each person as far as how are all those puzzle pieces that are meant to come together. I mean, imagine if the soul and spirit like really come into education. That'd be such a good world and such a good place for kids.
Yeah, I love how you said that. I didn't think about that soul focus, but it's true.
Yeah, it's so necessary. So many children just don't feel like they fit in, and I truly believe it's because like the system never changed to accommodate the new type of child that's coming through and coming up. And I definitely feel in the last 4 years, especially when you had that contrast of let's go completely online, and like then it's like, wait a second, this isn't even experiential learning. This isn't even being in the presence of each other. So, not only that, what else do we need to do to help support the kids? And I definitely feel like schools that you're describing are popping up more and more. My wife and I started our background in education. I was a teacher. She was a teacher, both special education. So we've always believed in individuals, right? From that background. And it's really, like you said, I feel like this conversation has been very hopeful in the reality of where we're moving towards and why we're moving there. So, I want to thank you for kind of shedding some light on like the hope that exists underneath the chaos, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. A better world is coming. Thank you so much, Casey, for sharing so much over this past hour.
Thank you. I love the experience of just being able to, freely talk to people who are curious and have their own stories. And I just appreciate you inviting me into, having this conversation.
Oh, it's totally our pleasure. And could you just share if anybody wants to work with you, is interested, who hears this, just your website or a good way to connect with you if that's something that's available?
Yeah. You can email me at caseylepper@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram. The handle is Casey Lepper, and you can DM me.
And that's Lepper with 2 P's, because right before the podcast, I misspelled it with 1 P and the link didn't go through.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, CASEYLEPPR@gmail.com.
Yeah, if you're watching, if you're listening, thanks for spelling it.
That's just how my mind works.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks again, Casey, for being a part of the podcast. And we're excited to share you with our audience.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again.